Welcome to the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and celebrity interviews live from the grotto with Greg Hanna. Greg, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing awesome, Neil, and excited to talk to our next guest.
Yes, Jimmy Patula is with us, and we're so excited to have you on, Jimmy. And just your the film Trust and Love. I mean, honestly, I had I broke down in tears from the film. So thanks again for stopping by, Jimmy.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, where's your long hair? That's all I have to say. But go ahead, Greg, with your first question for Jimmy.
It's an obvious one. Jimmy, how did you come up with the idea for Trust and Love?
I sadly went through a divorce almost 20 years ago. And the real story is I ended up raising two sons on my own that are now 29 and 30. But when I was going through it, I thought I was in a great marriage, and my wife was frankly cheating on me. And you wake up in the morning and you go to, and I had just built up my business, and you realize that you can lose everything overnight. And I just thought in the back of my mind, I thought, God, I'd like to do a modern day divorce movie. So that's sort of where the seed was. The one that I remember years ago growing up. You might remember it as well. Is Kramer versus Kramer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that movie broke my heart. So that's sort of where the seed of the idea came.
And Jimmy, what I gather, when you talk about this is ultimately people have to check it out to see really the ending, because again, you get to create things the way you want to create them. But it really showed how awful divorce attorneys are and how horrible the situation is. And if every person who decided to get divorced would just meet together and with a mediator, then no money involved, or just to break it down and have the conversations, it's the best thing, because ultimately you're having other people speak for you. And this is my
Oh, yeah.
experience alone,
I,
right?
exactly. I mean, obviously, if I would have wrote what exactly happened to me, it wouldn't have been interesting. We never ended up getting back together. But I'm with you. I was like, if people think the grass is greener on the other side, they break up a family, they go over there and find out, frankly, it's just as brown kind of a thing. And exactly, a lot of in fact, in my situation, we could have resolved it. We had it resolved, but when you go to a lawyer, the first thing a lot of times they do is separate you, and because it's a hourly thing on the clock, and it's just a devastating thing.
And they know you have money. They're going to just keep just billing you. And then
Yeah.
it goes back and forth emails and not speaking as you speak. I don't know about grass is greener on the other side. I'm very glad I'm divorced, but ultimately I would agree with you on one phase. I just some of the stuff that you showed with the lawyers and the back and forth and the anger management. Oh boy, that's all I have to
Right.
say. I'm gonna throw
No, no, absolutely. I mean, my whole thing was in the seed of it was, look, if you're somebody that was in maybe you'll think about, should I cheat, kind of a thing. Is it worth? But I chose with the movie, and Mick Davis, who directed, was very good, because originally my script was much darker than the movie. And when I met Mick, he was, and he helped bring some of the comedy, and he helped sit down with me, and we spent a few weeks together, and I did rewrites. And I thought, I wanted to have a happier ending. But mine didn't have the happy ending, but I think it to leave a positive message out there.
Wow. Well, I haven't had a chance to see it yet, and I'm looking forward to it. But tell me about your character and also Eric Roberts' character.
Yes. So, well, my character is a record producer who lives in Malibu. I happen to live in Malibu, so I was able to use that. You guys will like my story, frankly. Believe it or not, I'm from Oil City, Pennsylvania.
See, he's in
Wow.
Boston. I'm in Pittsburgh, but I love it. I
And,
saw that
and
in radio. You
yeah,
and I need to
and I started in radio. I
and
started in
I
radio.
started at WRCT 88.3 was my first part of my syndication 15 years ago. The college
My
radios, even though I
my
didn't go to college, I got sponsored. Go ahead.
My first radio job was in high school at WOYL in Oil City, Pennsylvania. You'll love this. Before school, I would drive by the radio. Well, my bicycle. I'd ride my bicycle to the radio station, and I would read the school lunch menus over the air.
I love it.
but that started a good 10 to a 12-year career. And radio got me from Pennsylvania to California.
That's
But
phenomenal.
but the story's about a record producer who lives in Malibu. He's successful and he's trying to get a hit record out of this rock band. And we've got a special thing there. We have a real rock band in the movie, a band called Steelheart. They had they still are around. They had some hits back in the '90s, and we're trying to resurrect them. And we had a nice thing happen where Millie, the singer of the band, said, "Jimmy, why don't we use Robbie Krieger from the Doors' studio?"
Mm.
I said, because he knows Robbie and worked with Robbie, so we got to do the studio scenes at Robbie's studio, and we thought we got to find a cameo for him. So he did a little cameo for us, and then when I had the script written, I had a friend who knew Eric, because we were looking for somebody to play the guru who's, quote, a therapist, who's a kind of a crazy therapist. And Eric read the script and said, "Hey guys, if it works in my schedule, I'd love to do it." And thank God it worked out. And he does a surprising nice job in the film. Of course,
That's great.
He's a legend. Yeah.
Absolutely. Greg, another question for Jimmy about, I guess, entrepreneurship and stuff. Where you want to go with this? And
Well, man, I'd love to ask you about that. Neil's got a business. I've got a business. I'm a bad employee, so I decided to start my own company when I was 21, and that's all I've ever done. So,
yeah, we very similar. I worked in radio as a young kid, and I saw how fast people got fired in radio. And this was back in the day where it was real radio, it wasn't. And I was a young kid, and I was like, do I really need to be? I fell into it as a kid, and so what happened for me was I was actually working on the air at KSJO in San Jose, California. Radio got me out there. I was at the time maybe 21, 22 at the time. So I'd worked in radio or 23. I worked in radio from the time I was 17 to like 23, 24. And you're only on the air, as at those days, 4 or 5 hours a day. So I got you're always looking to pick up extra cash. So believe it or not, I got a job at the Columbia School of Broadcasting being an instructor at the school. So I'd get off my radio shift, and I was literally a long-haired 22-year-old kid, and I was literally teaching radio. And to be honest, it was this particular franchise, sadly at the time, they were enrolling anyone who walked in the door. They had federal aid, and you'd start off with a class of 40 people, it'd end up with 8. And I knew most of them never were going to get into radio. And believe it or not, I became friends with some of my students, and they're like, "Jimmy, how do I get into radio?" And I said, "Look, not like this." I said, "Frankly, go to the smallest radio station you can find, show up at 7 a.m. because those were the days where the owner operator is going to be opening the door, and ask them to work for free." And they'd look at me like I was crazy. I'd say, "Drive to the smallest radio station you can drive to and tell the owner you'll do anything for free." But basically, it gave me the idea for a company I started called Radio Connection, which, believe it or not, this was 40 years ago. We're now called Radio Recording Film Connection. And it's very unique. I started it by accident, but basically what it is the thing about the broadcast school I was at the time, the curriculum was old and outdated. They didn't have any placement for the students. And my idea was, I knew being in radio, being in the door was half the battle, because we know how, if you're going to hire the guy who's frankly there, at least in those days.
Yeah.
And basically the idea was, I rewrote a program for you to be a radio broadcaster. But what I would do is I would get you an interview, and we still do, at a radio station. And let's say you're the program director of the radio station. I would I'd have somebody I used to run little ads in Rolling Stone, get into radio, and I'd have an 800 number. They'd call me. I'd say, "Give me your 3 favorite radio stations." They'd give them to me. And of course, I'd interview them over the phone, make sure they had a voice, make sure they knew. And I said, "Okay." And then I would call a program director, and I'd say, "Listen, I've got a freelance job for you." I think at the time I charged $3,000. I said, "I've got this gal or guy who wants to learn radio. You interview them. If you feel they have what it takes, I'll pay you $1,500, and you be their mentor. You be their teacher and guide them through this course." So that's sort of how it started.
Wow.
And that's what we do. If you want to be a music recording engineer, if you want to be a filmmaker, of course, now we're a legitimate private post-secondary school, but we're certainly, much cheaper than college. And we do the same thing. If you want to be a recording engineer and you're in Pittsburgh, we'll get you into Mr. Smalls or one of the studios.
Wow.
If you want to get into a film company in New York, so basically all of our students learn one-on-one. It's basically the age-old apprenticeship approach in learning.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's the website for that?
It's recordingconnection.com, radioconnection.com, and filmconnection.com because
Excellent.
yeah. So that's the business I started, and it's been able to allow me to do some of the fun stuff like make this movie.
Cool.
Now, not what I love about this is the fact of the story of entrepreneurship, and Greg loves this too. There's always a story of why we decided to do something. We had to create something out of nothing. Now, Greg says he doesn't like being an employee. It started. Well, I was a professional wrestler. I was a teacher, and I just was sick. And I did the entrepreneurship back and forth, and then finally said I'm going to do it. But ultimately, I love to do it because it's providing something that somebody else doesn't have, or I'm going to find a way to help somebody else. It's almost in my education background as a teacher. I mean, as owner of a tutoring business, or being a teacher, it's all what I try to serve the person, make sure that I help them, teach them, and provide a great service. So I too am. It's very interesting how you created that marketplace. Do you see yourself retiring anytime soon from this?
Well, it's funny you say that. I didn't start the company thinking I was going to make money. It was real. It was just the naiveness of I knew the best way to get into radio was get in a radio station as an intern. And then it turned into a bigger company. We've got like 35 employees, and I have a COO who's really hands-on. So I don't have to work that much as hard as I used to, obviously. And but you'll also love this story, being a professional wrestler. My first film I did in Pennsylvania, you got to see it. It's on Apple TV. It's called Reversal. It's a father-son story set out of high school wrestling. I was a former wrestler in Pennsylvania, and my father was my coach. That's the first, believe it or not, movie I did. We won a prize at the first Tribeca Film Festival. And I used all unknowns. I used real wrestlers. So it's an older film, but you can get it on Apple TV. It's called Reversal. You'll love it, being a former wrestler. And Kurt Angle, we had like 6 Olympic gold medalists who championed the film at the time.
Oh, wow.
So they showed up at screenings. I four-walled it in theaters and got the reviews, and that it's a father-son story set around wrestling. So so that was my first. And I got to tell you, I did quite well financially with that film. Now what I'm learning because that was the days of, I mean, we sold like 80,000 DVDs online. I mean, if you go to Reversal, we don't do it anymore, but if you go to reversalthemovie.com, you can read the stories about it. But that's the other thing. When I decided to make this film, I'm learning now on distribution. Now we have a distributor, but I'll see how it all flies, because now you're bound to the streamers. So it's going to be slow money over time. So we'll see how it works. I'm like,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But I'm a risk taker, and I like to learn as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's a common goal, or a common trait amongst, successful entrepreneurs, is a high risk tolerance. I think you have to have that, right?
Yeah. Look, I was silly enough to self-finance this film. Everybody, nobody would have made this movie. I have friends that have been trying to get movies made, and I was just like, well, let me, I mean, obviously you don't want to, mortgage your house to go make a movie. You got to, but it's a risk. And I'm trying to, like I said, I think for the budget that we had, I mean, obviously we did this film in 20 days. We only had, 1 to 2 takes. So it's not, you're competing with, Hollywood movies. But as I found with Reversal, I mean, if you have a beginning, a middle, and end, I'm not going to say everybody's going to love the movie, but I think it's really about telling a story, and if you can tell a story and get that, it was a little bit of a risk for us too, because I'm not a well-known actor. I'm not at all. I was like, well, let me mix it. Why don't you play the father? And I said, okay, so it was like, and then a couple of the actors are very unknown. In fact, the guy who plays my brother, Timmy, never acted in his life, but he had the look for what I
But
wanted.
he really did decent shit. That's his first time
Yeah.
acting.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's cool.
Are you kidding me? So, I mean, I thought he played a character that could be played in anything.
Well,
The way he did it.
that's who he is. I wrote about this beach bum surfer guy, and my buddy goes, Jimmy, what about Timmy? And I said, oh, because that's what he is. This guy lives in an RV and surfs. That's his life. He teaches surfing in Malibu. Been there for 30 years. Everybody knows him. And I was just like, you'd be perfect. And thank God he trusted and just was able to play himself.
Oh, that's a great story. Did he go to actingconnection.com or?
Yeah. No.
No, he just did a really good job for his first role. Okay, Greg has a final question for Jimmy, and this question is pretty deep. Go ahead.
Yeah, right before I ask that, just real quick, because the movie is so, I think, important based on the subject matter and the roots of it. I think it's really important. What do you hope the viewers learn from your film?
I think obviously family. Another thing in the film is which happened to me. I have a son who great kid, and I since from the time he was in kindergarten till like literally high school, all his friends were girls. He never had a guy friend. Good looking kid. All my buddies would come over. Man, this guy's got the girls and the chicks, and he never had any guy friends. Although he was popular in school and he had acquaintances, but no, it was always just him and a bunch of girls. And he came to me one day when I was in my home office. At the time, he's 15 or 16. He says, Dad, he was crying severe, like, I don't understand. Why aren't I like you? I don't understand what's going on. And I said, Brandon, what's up? And he says, Dad, I think I might be gay. I don't know. And thank God, I hugged him and said, I love you. And, and then I'm like, really, part of me, but I knew that it was me, but it was, I didn't know. Look, guys, again, I'm from Oil City. And even though I'm living out here and living in Malibu, I didn't understand it, and of course he was having a very hard time and struggling with it. He wasn't accepting it. And I talked to a few friends that I know, and that funny enough in the film business that are gay. And I said, they said, Jimmy, do you think I signed up for this? It was, in other words, I was the kid in high school crying in my bedroom going, why don't I like Playboy magazine? You know what I'm saying? And so it was really a learning point for me as well. And I thought, and then we went to a therapist and helped him. And then I really learned a lot about how a lot of these kids end up not being accepted by their families and by their parents. I mean, and you'd be shocked at the numbers. And even when I started to do my own research, the highest suicide rate is sexuality issues in men and women, even when they're older. And you hear these stories, and I thought, that was the other thing. I thought I want to bring that into the film and really have people understand that you are born a certain way. It's it's funny. Because people are like, well, how, and there's no reason. And look, if I'll be honest, if when I first moved to LA, I mean, look, if the gays were walking on this side of the street and I was on this one, I'd probably be on the other, not that side. So maybe it was God's funny joke in a way, but I thought it was an education for me, believe it or not, as naive as that sounds. And I think that's really the long-winded answer is I think it's about family. And I want people to understand, your family is your family. And, you may go through a divorce, but if you have kids, they're your kids, and you need to be there for them. So I really like, even though we used some comedic stuff in the film, in fact, we had the it's funny, he gets the advice from a drag queen in the movie, rather than, but who's which you'll see when you see it, who basically tells him, look, it's you'll figure it out if you are, so it's hopefully that message can get out there to people.
No, that's excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that. That was a
Yes.
good story, important story too, especially these days. But so tell me, Jimmy, here's my question. What do you feel is the most important thing in life you've ever learned?
That we can't control a lot. Frankly, we can't control it. I mean, and we just have to. My motto is, we can't control the world. We can't change the world ourselves. And I always like to just, I try to teach my kids. I got newly married 12 years ago, and my wife had never had kids. So believe it or not, I'm back in the kid game. So I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. So
Wow.
I love it. Yeah. So and I think that my thing is to just all you can do is do the right thing. Keep your side of the street clean. Be honest. Don't lie, because it'll come back. Learn, and just try to you can't control, and try to do good. Try to be good out there.
Yeah, great advice.
Fantastic. All right, Jimmy, best place we can check out the film. Where can we go?
Well, right now we're on Amazon Prime. We're on Apple TV, and so they have a whole formula. It'll eventually be going to other streamers and cables, but right now Apple TV and Amazon Prime.
Awesome.
Trust and love. I appreciate this, guys. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Thank
It's
you,
a
Jimmy.
pleasure.
All right. That was a special simulcast Neil Haley Show.